Hello and welcome back to Val Verde Broadcasting. It's Monday evening to you. It's Monday morning to me. We got a very special exclusive today. So those of you who have been watching Netflix, as many of you do, may have noticed a film drop on Friday called His House, directed by Remy Weeks, which is a kind of a British set horror film. So it just so happens that returning Valverdean Toby Venables was co-writer of that film, along with Felicity Evans, both of whom joined me this morning to talk about the film, getting it made, and what it's all about. So, morning, guys. How you doing?
Good morning. Very well.
All right. Yeah. Bit windy. I mean, the weather.
TMI, Toby. TMI. I don't know what your diet's like, but that is what that is.
Oh my god! And I tell you, the window cleaner's literally just arrived. It freaked me out just for a second there, but
I can hear like that. Do.
Yeah, that's carry on.
Yeah, it's no fine. It adds a layer of social realism, which seems apt. So I watched the film myself last night. Obviously, it dropped this weekend. Must be a pretty exciting weekend for you two, I suppose.
Yeah, it went a bit crazy actually from Friday, because it was a bit confused. Well, I was a bit confused. I don't know about anyone else, because they said it was going live on Netflix on midnight, the 30th of October, and it's like, and I think people got confused, like, midnight, which end is that, and also is that, what time zone is that, and it was all sorts of that, that kind of stuff. But people, it was up on Friday anyway, and from that point on, people were kind of like sending messages and sort of things on Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, and Saturday particularly, because obviously a lot of people will have seen it on Friday night and then again on Saturday night. But through Saturday there were loads of messages,
and very, very positive as well. It's been overwhelmingly positive, hasn't it? Haven't seen anything quite like it.
No, it's a bit. It almost makes me feel a bit paranoid, actually. like, hang on, this can't be right.
Yeah.
There we go.
Catch.
The horror of success. Well, I did actually see that out because I'm involved in kind of horror movie related stuff online and elsewhere, and it obviously I knew about His House through you guys, but it's actually come back round from other people in my kind of social networks saying, oh look, there's this new film called His House, it's really great, and there's me going, ha 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 ha, I know all about it, I've got a video coming out. So yeah, it seems that it's one thing to know from the inside that this film is coming, but I have seen it referenced in lots of places, and the reactions are very positive. I really enjoyed it myself. I thought it was really great. That was my Sunday night viewing yesterday with a sort of takeaway and everything, which was good. It's not probably the best film to eat to. Horror films generally aren't, but there you go.
Not really.
So could you just explain to us the origins of the concept, when it was written, and your process of kind of creating the screenplay? I just need to clarify, the screenplay was rewritten by the director, but it's based upon you guys' original screenplay.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And also we developed it with him. So it's not, Remy didn't just kind of like sort of roll up like right at the end and, head off into the sunset with it. It's like there was a lot of development.
Yeah, there was a process, wasn't there?
In terms of how it began, do you want to say about how it began?
Yeah.
It was Felicity's idea. So.
Yeah, it like so many ideas, creative ideas, it came from quite a left field place. I was reading about a house in Essex, and people who are into this kind of thing probably have heard of it. It's called the Cage in Essex, and it's long been a house with a reputation for being haunted in quite a dramatic way. Lots of really meaty, genre-rich happenings. Blood, pools of blood appear on the floor. It all kicks off in this house. And the lady who owned certainly who owned it when it was in the press a bit, was saying she couldn't live there. She was too frightened to live there. Everything that was happening there was so intense, she couldn't live there anymore, and therefore couldn't rent it, and she couldn't rent it out either. And I think ended up sort of just trying to rent it out for the evening to ghost hunting parties. And but this house is in a really amazing part of Essex, very beautiful part of Essex, and which is obviously on the commuter belt. And I just thought, God, there's this house, and I wrote a piece about it actually, and because I was thinking, you know, we're always encouraged to see like home ownership as a kind of, it's like a pinnacle of middle class life, and owning a house is seen as this sort of milestone that you're expected to reach, and owning property, and then I thought, well, what happens when this property sort of, there's this kind of like the house on you know, The Haunting of Hill House. What happens when this house is sort of sitting outside the norm? Well, it's going to be sort of lumped with people who we're also told are, you know, outside the norm, that we're supposed to kind of, you know, a house that's othered is going to have people lumped in it who we're othering. And I wanted to make that, I really wanted to make that clear. I wanted to bring that out, that these human beings that are coming here, we're, you know, there are people in the press, people in politics who are invested in othering them. And I just kind of wanted to make that correlation between a society that puts more, you know, importance on an investment, on a house, on a building, on a property, than it does on making a home, on people having enough, on there being enough homes for people, is correlating with the society that sees these human beings turn up in these boats and thinks that, you know, that's any way to treat human beings coming to sort of escape war zones. So that might, I mean, I hope that's all making sense.
Yes, no, absolutely.
It sounds like quite a convoluted thought process, and maybe it is. But so that's how it sort of struck me, that, you know, this correlation between how we view property and how we view dwellings and places where people need to live, and how we view other human beings, because it all ties into how we treat other people, and it all ties into how we expect other people to live.
Also, that, I mean, because all the time, because we do this, we sort of think up these kinds of stories for a living. Well, sort of, yeah, mostly for a living. That we're constantly trying to think, because horror is very formulaic, and like the haunted house and people in a house and being stuck in it and being tormented by the house, but also bringing trauma to it. Because, I mean, every haunted house, I've lost count of how many haunted house movies I've seen where, you know, it's usually an American family, it's a remote house, and it's the family rolls up and something has occurred. There's been some trauma somewhere, always. There's always a teenage daughter, and there's always tensions in the family, and like, we're really going to make a go of this, honey, you know, and it's like, no, you're not, because it's all going to go horribly wrong. But it always starts that way, with like people in a house investing everything in it, basically, sometimes literally in money, but I mean also emotionally, and then it's like, this is the sort of make or break thing. And it's kind of, it always had the elements that are in his house are kind of, most of them are those tropes from the haunted house movie. You know, the people turning up, wanting to make a fresh start, trying to heal old wounds. That's basically what it is, you know, with carrying boxes. And that's literally what, you know, they arrive with one box, but always the issue with that is, and Kim Newman mentioned this in his review for Sight and Sound, always the issue is, why don't people just leave? You know, when things start kicking off, it's like, no, that's it, I'm out.
And that really, that does tend to undermine the integrity of the whole story. It does. Because the feelings of isolation that the filmmaker tries to engender don't really feel real. They don't really feel genuine. Because, you know, you're always thinking, I mean, part of the fun in watching these films, but, you know, you're always thinking, just get in your car and drive away to the town. Whereas here, with this, I thought, I was thinking about it earlier, how I really like something I was reminded of recently. I really like that thing in Halloween where she's she's in the middle of a suburban area, and she's running around. That's the bit that stayed with me from when I first watched Halloween as probably younger than I should have been to watch Halloween, actually, where she's running around and she's knocking on the doors and she's screaming and no one answers the doors. So that John Carpenter so neatly gets that feeling of isolation within that suburban area where it's highly populated, there's loads of people around, but you still get that feeling of isolation is really strong. And I thought that was what was captured with his house, is that feeling of isolation is genuine, because they are in this strange place. They can't leave the house, they're not allowed to leave the house, or they'll get sent home to a war zone, but also sort of feeling adrift and feeling like the people around them are, it's not a place they understand or feel comfortable in. So that kind of echoed what John Carpenter achieved in Halloween, I think.
Yeah.
And that was what frightened me the most in Halloween when I watched it. Not the psycho killer, but the fact that no one would open the door.
And it's totally, his house is totally genre in the sense that it's not like, hey, let's do an art house kind of thing about asylum seekers, and it's all, although it is an artful film. I mean, what Remy did is amazing, but I think he got it straight away that it was this absolutely kind of genre, in a way still quite formulaic, in the sense of it's got all those elements, all those tropes of the story of that sort of subgenre of the horror movie, the haunted house movie, but it's what it's doing with those that is a bit different, and trying to bring something more to it than just like even though it's got the jump scares, it's got this sort of insidious, all of that kind of stuff in it,
emotional underpinning to really make it to get you in the feels, as well as just making you jump out your skin.
But that was always what we were interested in, like doing something with genre
that mattered as well, that felt like it
within
mattered.
it. Yeah. And in fact, I looked back recently at the original pitch that we sent to there's two producers that we knew, Ed King and Martin Gentles at Starchild Pictures, big fans of Kubrick, hence the name Starchild Pictures. And it said, I can't remember the exact wording, but like right at the end, there's just a sort of line summing up. There's the pitch kind of summing up the idea, which was slightly different at the time, but fundamentally, the fundamentals were the same. And then this last line saying, social realism meets Hollywood jump scares in the style of Insidious and Babadook. And it still is that. So it's like right from the word go, it was like, that's the idea. Like there's a genuine issue here and a haunted house movie, and it's just like doing that.
I think that all comes across in the final product, definitely. I mean, not being couched with that, but it was interesting to me partially because it sort of reflects my own upbringing, but you never saw. I wasn't haunted by a witch, just to be clear. No, you never see council house horror. A haunted house is normally it's like The Haunting, big grand house, or even the Babadook. They're kind of a
Ghost Watch.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Ghost Watch. Yeah, very good point, actually. It's usually kind of big, because even the Babadook, they're supposed to be kind of like low income, but it's like quite a big gothic house that they live in. Always, and as soon as they go up to the house in this film, and there's like a mattress outside and all the kind of crap in the garden, then they go inside, and the front. I love that bit when the front door just kind of goes inside when he goes to open the front door and it collapses in. It was very funny. Yeah, we'll fix that. It had all of those kind of things in it, and I just thought I don't think the film makes it clear. I don't suppose it really matters, but where was it shot, or where is it meant to be set? Because you mentioned Essex, and it
looked like Tilbury, which is in Essex. But
it is in Essex. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's pure coincidence. I think that was the best, in terms of practical.
I was watching it with my housemate last night, and we were kind of going, which shit place is this? Because it's set, not being mean to the people of
you said
that
it.
place.
You said
I did. Yeah, it's on me.
Not
That's on me.
that.
That's on me. There's nothing to do with you two. But you know, it's a great location, that kind of estate and
It
that
is.
house and
I
everything.
mean, it's totally real, and it's a real place. And actually, you know, when they were filming there, like Ed King, the producer, was saying, "Oh, it got a bit scary because all these kids were sort of crowding around, like quite big kids, and he was starting to get quite intimidated, and they wouldn't go, they wouldn't disperse."
They gave them stuff to do. He said we started giving them like little odd jobs to do, and they just were good as gold after that, which just shows they just want to know what's going on and be involved.
Yeah, it's cool. There's a horror film being made on your estate. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'd be excited.
I'd be rocking up and wanting to know what was going on.
So when you had the concept, you did a pitch.
Yeah.
Did you then go through the usual process of writing a treatment? Then you go straight to the screenplay. How did you develop it from there?
Yeah, we read several treatments.
Lots of treatments. We had a lot of treatment.
Yeah.
We
had several ideas for how it could go forward, didn't we? And
yeah, it's really interesting looking back. At one point, and in fact, I think, because I asked Ed King about this recently, because I couldn't quite remember, because you go through so many
it was a while ago now,
variations.
2 years ago now.
It was. This was like
2015.
End of 2015,
Yeah,
beginning of 2016.
Yeah.
I think we first pitched it in 2015, sort of towards the end, and then it got serious in 2016 and got commissioned. But the original pitch, we'd set it. It had been contemporary, and then we got this idea. I think because we'd seen the Enfield Poltergeist or something, and we're sort of like, ooh, 70s. It's sort of period 70s. It's that hauntology.
Hauntology and that whole thing about the 70s just being totally creepy.
So I think we at one point we made it set in the 70s, and they were Ugandan Asians, which was the thing at the time, like a sort of quite a relatively large influx of Ugandan Asians, because Idi Amin was forcing them out, but basically exactly the same, but just a period piece. But then I think we kind of felt that it was a bit of a novelty.
And a layer too far. We thought, you don't want to put too much distance between what we're trying to say and what we want to do with this, and the end result, the end piece.
And this was 2016, so like all those arguments about immigration and the issues of immigration, and at the time it's predominantly Syrian refugees, who were the story, really, as far as we were concerned, and that's what they were originally. They were Syrian Muslim asylum seekers, and for quite some time they were as well. And then we pitched it, they liked it, we discussed it, they commissioned it. Then the sort of serious work began, and we kind of discussed various things, did a treatment, brought it back to them, they came back to us with notes, and it sort of goes back and forth various times. But there were lots and lots of, I looked at the folder and there's just like all these treatment 1, treatment 2, treatment 3, it just goes on and on.
Final doc. Final.
Yeah, that's the same every time you edit a video. It's like Final Cut 2, Final Cut 2A, Final Cut 2A.3, Final Cut 2A.3 alpha. It just goes on and on. So having got everything written, and it sounds like something you had things in motion. You have talked to me before about, it's quite a story behind getting this sold and made, by the sound of things, particularly regards to who was interested and where it was shopped around. Are you able to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Are you talking about?
I'm trying not to lead you, but I probably should a bit more, shouldn't I? But
just do it. Just do it. You mean
the Weinsteins? Those awful Weinstein boys were involved. Are you able to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, totally. Because this is actually after the screenplay, because after we'd been through a long process of the thing was, Remy was brought on board, Remy Weeks, and he hadn't directed a feature before. They really liked his work, and it was really good. He'd done a short film called Tickle Monster, which I think is on YouTube. And
Fright Fest, hadn't it? Or Channel 4 backed.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can't remember.
Yeah.
But it had created a big stir anyway. And it's beautifully put together, and visually, clearly he's a really, really great sort of visual artist. And they had this idea to sort of get him on board as director, because he's a black director as well. So it kind of it helps to kind of ground this as a project, and kind of like in a sense validate it as a project, because it has to have that authentic kind of perspective and connection. And then we all discussed all sorts of things, and things went back and forth, and Remy sort of wrote bits and sent them back to us. And so actually at that point it becomes quite difficult to track which ideas came from where. And there were ideas where originally the family had 2 children, and then they had 1 child, but they'd lost another, and it was all sorts of different variations, and various moments when people went, hey, what if we did this? And everyone goes, ooh, can we do that? It's like, yeah, let's try it. And some of those fell by the wayside, and some made it into the final thing. And there were probably about 5 different endings, I should think, which we tried out all sorts of different endings. And so yeah, but so that happened, and then once everything was kind of like pinned down, we went off and wrote the first draft of the screenplay, and then came back with that. And at that point we kind of knew it's not, I mean, it's a first draft, it's not quite there yet. And it's very tricky, because you're writing, when you're developing, you're basically writing by committee, and everyone's sort of throwing things in. And if one person went off and just did it, in a sense it would be clearer and more straightforward for them to do, but there are various perspectives coming in, and you're trying to kind of accommodate these slightly different viewpoints, some of which don't necessarily dovetail into each other that easily. So there's a bit of work involved in getting them to do that, or deciding actually that part doesn't work, so we'll get rid of that. But that's part of the process, and it was a really interesting process. And after delivering the screenplay, then obviously we knew there needed to be a second draft, and the producer Ed and Martin wanted to give Remy the chance to do his pass on the screenplay, and which he did. And from then on, really, that was, he did a pass on the screenplay, and then went into the sort of pre-production and filming process, setting up the filming process, when they were happy that it was kind of ready to go. So that's nothing about the Weinsteins, but I just wanted to sort of bring it up to.
No, that's good. I'm quite keen to sort of plot out it's nice to have a timeline of events. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, but also salacious, sensationalist tabloid crap. So that's why I brought up the Weinsteins, which you don't have to talk about if you don't want to.
No, we'd like to.
Sure, we'd like to.
Well, I know what I do know is that Ed and Martin they sort of bore the brunt of it, really, didn't they? And they went through a really tough time with it. And we were kind of like, we were hearing what was happening secondhand from them, because they were really, they were at the coalface of that whole situation, weren't they? And
I think Ed
dealt with it amazingly well.
It was Ed who sort of broke that news.
Yeah, I did feel for them when that was happening.
Because obviously at that point we've kind of done our bit, and it's like, okay, Remy's doing his pass on the screenplay, and the next stage is, it's going to happen. It's going to be filmed, and it's like, at that point, unless we're sort of needed for some specific thing, our kind of role is finished. So, and we don't have any, we don't have any of our money in it. We don't. So we're just sitting back like, okay, just wait till it gets made. But there was one day, I can't remember if it was a phone call or an email or something, and Ed just said, slight problem. Bob Weinstein's sort of slapped a $10 million lawsuit on us.
Jesus, 10. Okay.
So wow. Not really sure whether we can make the film. Like, okay.
Oh God! And that was just part of the tug of war and the sort of. Yeah.
Yes.
Were there a lot of interested parties? Was there? I mean, because it sounds like they were keen, obviously, particularly if they tried to lock it down in a lawsuit and stuff. Were there many other people wanting to buy it? Was there a few different kind of possibilities in terms of getting it made?
I think it certainly created a buzz, didn't it? It was,
Mm.
and that was sort of interesting to watch that, build and watch that. And it started getting reported in industry, like Hollywood industry press started picking up on this idea, this hot new idea that. And that obviously, actually, I think the Weinstein involvement kind of gave that a newsworthiness that kind of raised the profile as well, which I'm sure Ed and Martin would say, yeah, well, we could have done without that, but it did contribute, I think, to it being in the news.
It definitely did. We can laugh about it now.
Then in the manner of the T-Rex eating the Velociraptor in Jurassic Park, stuff happened to the Weinsteins, which we all know about, and that kind of just as he's about to snap his jaws around the project.
That's
the Cosmos intervened.
He got his own lawsuit.
The Cosmos and several hundred women,
yes,
telling their stories,
girl power,
intervened. So, but because basically what happened was, because I think the thing was, as a concept, just like in one line, if you sort of describe what this is in one line, like asylum seekers in a house which has something in it which is doing bad, a presence in the house which doesn't want them to settle. Probably you could sum it up better than I just did, but anyway, it's really easy to sum up, and people get the concept. And also Get Out had happened by this stage. And so something that was particular, doing something political and taking a very, very sort of familiar genre and doing something completely new with it that was saying something substantial, and still worked as just a kind of a great roller coaster ride horror movie. So there was a lot that had stoked some interest in that kind of project. And it just was fortunate that His House came along at the right moment. So that definitely helped. So that's one of the things that got people talking about it. And the Weinsteins, I don't know why I'm laughing. But they took it to the Weinsteins, and New Regency. New Regency got involved at some point. I'm not quite sure at what point, but Ed and Martin of Star Child Pictures, New Regency got involved, and so it's suddenly the project went from like this big to this big.
The budget increased.
The budget got bigger.
Hugely.
The distribution.
I didn't realise it was BBC Films as well until I turned it on yesterday. So was that distribution, or is that?
There was someone, I can't remember her name, but there was someone from BBC Films who Remy knew, who was involved in a kind of advisory capacity. Their involvement wasn't big, but New Regency, it's like essentially New Regency. It became their project. But anyway, back to the Weinsteins. There was a meeting with Bob at which he said, we want exclusive distribution. So it's like, okay, well, they're keen, that's good. But and I don't know who was not keen on that, but Remy wasn't. So basically they said no thanks, and they went away, because if you slap a lawsuit on it, it can't be made, because everyone's like, oh shit, what do we do now? So he claimed that there had been a verbal agreement that basically in the meeting. He's the only one who remembers that, I think, but anyway, and so there was that lawsuit, and for a brief time everyone was like, oh shit, we can't, this could kill it. And there was a brief time when we genuinely thought that this great thing that everyone loved, including the Weinsteins, had been killed by this lawsuit. But then the whole thing with Harvey happened, and the Weinsteins kind of dwindled in terms of their influence, and really that
they had other fish to fry.
They had other fish to fry. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
they just decided to go on and make the film anyway, and thought they'd probably forget about the lawsuit, and they did. So,
So
Now.
sorry, I shouldn't have brought that up, should I?
I just wanted to get a bit of tabloid sensationalism in the middle. So let's go back to nicer topics, not related to them. Or, well, I say nicer, it's going to get a bit dark, I suppose. There's the theme of parenthood in the film very strongly, but it's not, all is not what it seems, as Vincent Price might say. And your parents yourselves.
Yeah.
What did you approach the kind of those subject matters in the film with your own kind of parenthood in mind, or did you find any of that kind of quite tough to write? What were your approaches to that, or did you just have writers' heads on and we're writing a spooky horror film?
A bit of both, really. I think there's the part of you that is thinking, yes, this will tie into this kind of emotional power that I know needs to kind of power this section of the film, and this is a good springboard for these aspects of the story that need to be told. But what powers that is your, because all writing comes from within and comes from your emotions and how your brain marshals your emotions, really. So yes, certainly knowing that the punch that those ideas would have, as much as anything, knowing that once you put that sort of thing in, knowing that putting that on the screen would be like that moment where people watching would be like, oh, I feel that, I can feel that for sure. And there was one scene that I came up with that actually didn't make it into the final cut, which when we were talking about it around this big table, I said it, and particularly the parents in the room went, oh, which was when you're a parent, what happens very often when your children are little is they'll have a nightmare, and they'll come into your room in the night, and you're like asleep, and they'll go, oh, and you go, yeah, you lift up the duvet, and they climb in, and you sort of wake up in the morning and go, did one of the kids come in? And it all feels a bit like a dream because you're so exhausted, and the kids might toddled off and gone downstairs or whatever by this point, by the time you wake up. And I had this idea where the child comes in and gets in the bed, and they're half asleep, but the child is soaking wet, and they look, and it's
Oh God.
child, yeah, it's the child that is no longer with them. And so what was driving that was this sort of this combination of thinking that's a good moment for that point in the film, but also just visceral kind of fear, and I can't even sum up the emotion what that is.
We may use this in another film.
Yeah, yes. It's gone in the cuttings drawer, it's gone in the recycling bin. So.
I think it was at a point because the configuration of the family sort of changed and went through various.
Yeah, there were several children, and
basically the whole thing starts with more characters and gets pared down, and Remy pared it down even more, to the extent that actually later he had to do some reshoots to fill some bits back in again. But at that point, I think there were two children. There had been two children. Yeah. One had been lost at sea. The other one survived.
So they think it's the one.
So the child comes in and just says, "I'm cold," and it's like, in you get, and then sort of puts her arm around, and the child is freezing cold and soaking wet. And that as a
parent, that's just the thought of your child being cold and wet. I mean, that is just it's horrific. I don't know.
It's very the subject matter is very. I mean, the other thing just to mention upon as well is, I'm not a parent. I'm a single childless weirdo. But even to me, I thought it was quite like it's really powerful stuff in it, and sort of about loss and grief and things like that. You mentioned the Babadook earlier, which, pardon me, that. Well, the way I interpreted the Babadook was it was a personification of their grief, and the point is that they learn to live with it. And this, hey, spoilers for this film. Was that the kind of line of thought with this as well? Because the ending has them. I mean, he literally says, we live with our ghosts. They're part of us. They never go away. And then there's that great kind of shot of the doorways, and the house is just full of all the people from the boat. Was there a similar line of thought there, or
there were lots?
There more than one ending. There's more than one. I think when material is that powerful and that meaningful, there's more than one way to end it that would pack a similar punch. And I think we came up with something slightly different. Our final scene was different, but had that same sort of feeling of giving that same idea of sacrifice and what people sacrifice for each other when they have responsibility for each other and when they love each other.
And I think also it's like the end, how the ending of a horror movie plays out. It's like if it's a bunch of teenagers in a cabin, and it's like, well, 80% of them are going to get killed, and and one, maybe two aren't, and it's like, yay, I beat this evil, I got away, and it's yay. Or it's and a very sort of formulaic, straight, full-on genre movie, it can be like, yay, we beat it. But when you introduce very kind of weighty real world issues,
things that aren't going
you can't just yay, we built, we beat the immigration problem. And it's like, no, right, yeah, we've defeated all its Serco and the British government and prejudice, and you can't, you cannot do that. So it has to maintain this kind of
realism,
this balance, which actually, when Jordan Peele, when he did Get Out, he had exactly this issue, and the original ending of Get Out was really bleak, like you don't win, you do not win. And then Trump was happening, and he changed it because he thought, you know what, people don't, this isn't going to help anyone, just like this really major downer, when in the outside world the biggest downer possible was kind of like taking place. So he wanted to give a bit of hope without just sidestepping the issue. So he changed the ending for that reason. And you're always sort of thinking, how much do we want to kind of like
balancing act,
give people a feeling of positivity and possibility, and how much do we want it to still feel like the problem is not resolved. And there was one ending a couple of endings actually that were way bleaker.
I was, whilst watching it, I was like, I don't think I can cope if this has a downbeat ending, because it honestly kept me guessing, like, because there's the concept that essentially either perhaps he's going to kill himself or she will kill him, because it kind of went in a sort of The Shining-ish direction. And I was like, oh my God, if they both end up dead or getting dragged into that sinkhole, I don't know what I'm going to do. I think it was just because they'd been through so much together.
Yeah.
And the cost to their relationship and everything. And it was so...
as well, doesn't it? The sort of what you're putting your characters through, it becomes gratuitous and sort of... Yeah.
And it's all well and good to have a kind of shock ending.
Yeah.
That's fine, but I think it's a kind of read the room type thing. I just couldn't have coped because it was so bleak up to a point, and then they kind of, because it jumps into the kind of flashback sequence as well, and you kind of learn what's actually gone on. And it's like, oh God, don't make them cut their own throats or something. I can't deal with that. It's Sunday night. But I really, really liked how it came up. But the obviously Parenthood's a big thing. Sort of mistrust in a relationship and coping with something bad that's happened, and trying to adapt to a new situation and stuff was in there. The other thing worth mentioning, of course, is that you are a couple and you are parents, and you wrote a film about a couple. What was it like working together on a screenplay like that?
Oh, it's exactly like the film.
Yeah, totally.
Well, no, I mean,
we've written a lot of stuff together. And we like genre, and we have very out there ideas, And if our relationship was any genuine reflection on what we write, then you'd see us in the news.
We wouldn't be able to write it.
You know,
we wouldn't be able to actually collaborate if it was.
We're very normal, happy, content.
I was worried, like when I turned on Zoom,
all
your wall would have been caved in with a hammer, and then it'd be like...
I did think about sort of like replacing the backdrop with like the still of the wall, and I just thought, you know what? No, just no.
It would have been really funny, and I probably would have called the authorities, but you know.
But it's, I think it's, I mean, for us, in a way, it wasn't any different from anything else we've written together. And it's just like, it's this process of working stuff out and pinging stuff back and forth.
It's become quite seamless now, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it's just, it really helps kind of like push things along, because, you know, that point when you kind of like, you grind to a halt. And not we don't get writer's block as a result, as a rule. I probably shouldn't say that, but we don't. But sometimes you do kind of think you're like at a fork in the road where there are like, I don't know, several forks, and you're thinking, okay, where now? I just don't know. And actually, to be able to turn to someone and like discuss it, or for them to sort of take over for a bit and just say, look, I've taken it down here. What do you think? And like, oh yeah, right.
I'll give it a feed and I'll get it to sleep.
Do you in terms of the actual physical writing of the film, does one of you handle all the kind of typing up? Do you do kind of a flowchart, flip chart type approach? How do you do it?
Richard.
Huh?
Are you asking if I'm a secretary?
No, I've seen... Who was it?
Take a message.
Yeah, take a message. There was, is it Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright? Like they would take turns doing the actual typing of it. They would plot it all out, and then it'd be like, well, it's your turn to actually write it because I'm not doing that. And then the next pass would be, I think it was them. They would alternate in who would actually do it, or like, do you take turns in front of the laptop? Like,
no, what we tend to do is I think that's still going to shine on your face.
Totally is.
Yeah. Do you want maybe open the other one? So
that's it.
Oh, that looks lovely. Yeah, very subtle.
There you go. You're not glowing anymore.
We come to we thrash out the story together in quite fine detail, and then one or the other of us, normally you actually, types up the story, a beat sheet, and then we just divide it up. We just say, well, I'll take from this bit to this bit where it ends with X saying whatever, and then we kind of just highlight it, and then we divide those two documents up, and then because we've planned the story out so carefully and we know the characters so well, we can write stuff that I think to the untrained eye would certainly seem like it had been written by one person, which maybe is a bit creepy, but that's how we roll.
I mean, I think people find it hard to get how that would work, and like if we said, oh yeah, I wrote this character and Felicity wrote that character, and we can, it's like, but we couldn't do that. In a way that would seem to make more sense, but actually to us it doesn't make more sense. And actually sorry to sort of step outside of this when we did the Bob and Barn film, Richard, remember that?
Yes, I do. Yeah,
I thought you would. And the Bob and Barn composers for games, film, TV, and stuff, and they were talking about the fact that they sort of roughly work it out, and then Bob will do that bit of the film, and then Barn will do that bit of the film, and then Bob will do that, and they just do it, and then they kind of bring all the bits together. And I was actually thinking, God, how does that work? How do you do that? And then I thought, oh, hang on, that's how we do it. So actually, it's exactly the same.
I find this is like writing teams. I find that quite an interesting process because, like I said, with Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, they do flip charts and stuff, and then they go to screenplay, and then there's delegation as to who types what. When we did the Bob and Barn film, you're the writer, so I just filmed everything, and I've written a few things in the past, but I'm not terribly experienced at it, and I've only ever done it on my own, so I've never really had a handle on co-writing. And I know often in sitcoms, usually the American standard for a sitcom is it will say written by one person, and that's literally the person that typed it up. The writing room wrote it, but it's the person who collates all the ideas and puts it into a screenplay gets the credit. And then other people sort of do. I have heard, because you were talking before about like you write this character, I'll write that character, and that seems mad to me. And it's just sort of,
Yeah.
you can imagine two people sat around the same computer, just sort of going like, okay, John says this, all right, fine, but then Paul says this, and it just, there are different approaches to it.
It could work but in a way, I think when people sort of say stuff like that or think about stuff like that, I think they're probably thinking more about, I don't know, a more improvised kind of situation where, two actors have their basic characters and it's like, okay, we know roughly what this scene is, but just go with it. And it's like that kind of vibe.
That was supposedly the Curb Your Enthusiasm approach, is that. So the scene starts here, the scene ends there. You then fill the middle with.
Yeah. But writing, we wouldn't do it that way.
Certainly we have a lot of, I think something that does happen is we have a lot of projects on the boil and one of us will kind of take over. We do have natural, I wonder if maybe we get, like when we're discussing it, I think maybe one of us is kind of thinking out how one character would be as opposed to another. And also we've got to the stage where I can write a project. I can sort of say, do some sample scenes for something and write up a sort of a series Bible for something and just kind of run it by you. And you're like, yep, that's good. That's what I'd have done that. And vice versa.
I didn't have to do any
or
work,
I'll start it off like with a project we're working on at the moment. I did a lot of the initial sort of groundwork and then I just kind of, right, I've got to go on the school run now. Here's you do it.
Right.
Now. And now you're gonna sort of, you'll finish that off, whereas I've done like a whole other thing and I've just read it out to you while you're cooking. And
we've got 3 things.
Like,
we've got 3 things at the moment, which I'm mainly working on. One, Felicity's worked completely on it. She's basically wrote, but we sort of discussed it. And she wrote the whole thing. And then there's another one which came out of a discussion, which we're developing, which and annoyingly I can't be any more specific about any of the ideas.
Yeah.
Sure. But so for example, Felicity, when you come up, so you had the initial concept for his house. Was that on a pile of ideas you'd had and you were thought like this is the one, or did that just come straight out and you were like, okay, look, we have to do this? Or...
I just, I'm just thinking, really it's not, I don't think, right, I'm going to take to my thinking couch and,
Sure.
I'll be probably somewhere where I haven't got access to a pen. I have a lot of ideas while I'm driving, which is dangerous and also frustrating.
Right.
And I think my brain knows when I can't write something down and thinks, ha, I'll come up with that massively long bit of really witty dialogue, and I'll be thinking up dialogue in my head. And then, of course, by the time I've got home and given the kids their snack and whatnot, it's completely, that's something no one will ever know or hear. So.
Are those out of context pieces of dialogue that you would plug into something else, or is it just like, oh, this is a good bit of dialogue for what I'm working on now? Do you ever kind of just have, that's funny?
We get into a thing where like we'll be eating dinner and I'll go, I'm sorry, I've just got to write something down. I've pulled over in the car. I've pulled over and pulled out my notebook and written stuff down. Not dialogue, probably, unless it's like if something solves a problem in a plot I've been coming up with and thinking, well, yeah, but why does that happen? Or then what happens? And then I'll be driving along and then I'll just think, oh God, that happens, and I'll have to, So what happens is you'll jot a load of, we're always having ideas. We're always, there's an ongoing file with ideas for films, and I think we sort of say them to each other, and the other will go, that's or like the one we're working on at the moment. When I said it to you, I got really excited about it, and I said it to you, and you were silent. You did one of your famous silences for like a minute, and I go, oh God, you hate it, don't you? And you went,
actually,
no,
I really liked
it. I love it.
Actually, I really liked it, and it's got loads of cogs, like in Space, where sort of Mike goes, it basically that was happening in my brain. Yeah. And cogs were turning. I was thinking, oh, so if that happened, and that would mean, and that would, and I was sitting there in complete silence and was just thinking, oh God, this is bombed. This is totally bombed.
A very slow minute of your life, I imagine, whilst he's just sat there silently churning it over.
I'm used to it.
So yeah. Oh, sorry.
I think I think what happened was you asked a very reasonable short question and probably were hoping for a short answer, and I rambled on about driving.
Oh no, but actually,
you obviously haven't watched our channel because it's all that all the time. So yes, on brand. Don't worry.
In more sort of practical, in a more sort of practical sense, that idea was one of several that we pitched to Star Child. So we didn't just, it was like,
there were about 3 pages of
I mean, I know that everyone thinks, oh, you're trying to sell your screenplay. I don't know anyone who's just written a screenplay and sold it. I honestly don't. But I know lots of people who've written screenplays, got people interested, but the people who are interested, they don't want that screenplay because they've got their own things that they want to do. I mean, producers always have an idea of stuff that they want to do. And usually it's not your screenplay because the chances are too astronomically vast that these two things would coincide. But if they like your writing on the spec script, they might get you in for a meeting and
then you take your other
talk
ideas,
about it.
don't
Yeah,
you?
and or invite you to pitch and say, well, what other ideas have you got? And it's like you could spend your whole life writing screenplays that no one ever bought, even though everyone liked them. Because and it's like there's a point at which we just said we just need to pitch some ideas here and find out, because we're from a journalistic background, so it's like we want a copywriting background. We want to know what the brief is. So tell us what you want and we'll bloody write it. Okay, just let's just stop all this guessing game thing. I'm like, oh, what have you got in your bag of ideas? Well, I'm not going to tell you exactly, but just tell us what you want, we'll do it. And in a way, the easiest way to do that is just pitch a load of ideas. And often actually, there's one that people latch onto, and it's not always the one you expect. Not always. But this one, I think we kind of knew it had a really good premise. And yeah, Martin Gentles was the one who kind of latched onto it and kept hassling Ed about it until they.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Is there's kind of a myth? I don't know if you guys agree, but and you've touched on it already. But there seems to be a slight misconception or a myth that it's like a Willy Wonka, I've got a golden ticket thing, where someone writes a script and runs through the street with it, and the producer goes, "That's the one."
Because it has happened occasionally, and people latch onto that because it seems on the face of it quite simple.
Well, it's like Boondock Saints and things like that. That was the famous example. And
and it gets picked up, and that feels like I can understand that process. I do thing A, and then as a result of that, thing B happens, and thing B is amazing, and it makes it seem very accessible and understandable. But I think if people knew generally more that it's actually it's quite a frustrating and bitty process, and everyone does it differently. I mean, I don't think any one writer is going to have the same experience of how they got to where they've got as another writer, but that's not very inspiring. If you say it actually takes a long time and then can be quite dull, and with long periods not doing anything, then most people go, well, sod that, I'll go off and do something else then. So yeah, I think that hope should be found in that, actually, because what it shows is if you do keep plugging away and if you have good ideas and you learn your craft and you write a really stunning spec script that shows that you've got the chops, and you have you learn how to distill your ideas and write them down and keep going, just keep plugging away, then that's actually, to me, seems more hope-filled and encouraging than, wow, I just happened to write this amazing one-off script that got sold to Hollywood, by sort of almost by chance. So,
well, quite often with those stories, the person then doesn't necessarily work again or have a glittering career. It seems like it's kind of lightning in a bottle, and they don't tend to then. Whereas the reality is the grind. Really, it's the same as like being an actor. Our colleague Duncan, he's done all kinds of stuff, but it involves tons of auditioning and tons of even things that you're filmed in. He was in Skyfall and they cut him out. He was in Edge of Tomorrow and they cut him out, but he still did the work and still met all the people, still got paid, still had the experience, but he's just not in the end product. And then tons of adverts and stuff like that.
We've got obviously it's all on computers, so it's all virtual, but if it were real on paper, we would have drawfuls of stuff that's never seen the light of day. You know, you're just all the time ideas, writing, and stuff as well. You know, and you've got to learn to sort of be not get attached to it, which is very hard. But you know, I've been looking back through files and seen ideas and thought, oh, I thought that was a really good idea, but it's not great, and I'm probably best just keeping it in this drawer. So yeah, you produce a lot of material, and a lot of it is a lot of it. Well, no,
but you must be able to go and pinch bits out.
No, it all goes into it all becomes part of the process, and it all builds up to like you getting better at what you do, and distill, you know, like disciplining your thinking and disciplining the way you work. So yeah, it's all good.
Did you ever go and pick bits out? There must be times where it's kind of like, oh, do you know what? That project perhaps wasn't the one, or that idea wasn't the one, but there's a good scene or a good character, a good bit of dialogue. Can I not just take that and put it in the new thing? Or is that a bit backward looking, perhaps?
No,
sometimes ideas segue into other ideas that are stronger. But I for years I spent, oh my goodness, I was trying to pin down. I knew the feel of it and what the sort of characters were and the mise-en-scène and everything. And I knew the sort of the elements that I wanted. I was wanting to make this sort of kind of hauntology folk horror with some tech in it and la 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 la. And one day I just sat down and I wrote down like A4 page of like the story, and I was so pleased. And I read it out to you, and you went, "Yeah, that's the stone tape." And I was like, "Bloody is as well." I've just written. Oh. So I just, in the end, I just thought, forget that. That's just.
It was good though.
Yeah, because Nigel Neal.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I was so pleased. I thought, I've cracked it. I've got every element that I wanted for this story is there. The way it feels, the characters, what drives it, the metaphors. It's all there. Oh my God, I'm a genius. I knew it. Yeah, read it to Toby.
Well,
got the bad news.
last year, like, because one of the modules that I teach is feature film, like writing, screenplays, and the students had to pitch their ideas. And one guy, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, I'm not going to name him anyway, but he outlined this whole idea, had the whole story worked out about a village. It's set in Britain in the modern day, but it's slightly different, a bit weird, and there's a sort of slight fantasy element. So it's like the modern day, but there are wolves in the forest, and the wolves take people from time to time, and they're this big sort of demonized enemy. And there's a group called the Wolf Hunters who try and recruit, and there's this boy who gets recruited into the Wolf Hunters, and one of his parents was taken by a wolf, allegedly. And basically this whole story of this boy going with the Wolf Hunters, stumbling over a wolf cub, bringing it back. It's a sort of guilty secret. There's a girl who finds out, and he went through the whole story. And at the end of it, I said, "That's great. Have you seen How to Train Your Dragon?" And he's like, "Yeah, why?" I said, "That whole story in all its details is basically How to Train Your Dragon."
Oh, no.
He looked absolutely
it happens,
gobsmacked. But the thing was, it didn't actually matter, because the political aspects to this story, which were it had a totally different tone, and it still worked. It worked on its own terms. And I said, embrace it, be aware of it. Just, it's its own story. But some of these stories are quite formulaic, and it's okay to be formulaic sometimes, because sometimes that's what we want. And actually, going back to his house, it's okay. It's important that it follows these sort of steps of the haunted house movie, because it is a haunted house movie, and actually they're the things that lead you into the other stuff.
Engage you.
There is a kind of familiarity and a sort of, in a way, a comfort zone within it. I know it seems strange to say that about that film, but the things that make it feel sort of comfortable are the familiar genre.
I think that's what gives it its appeal. I think that's why people are enjoying it so much, because it does have, if you want a kind of genre horror pick, it is that. But it's also about kind of working class Britain and the immigrant experience, and grief and loss, and there's more there. There's more, beneath the surface, or behind the wall, if you prefer. that makes it work really well, not just as a genre piece, but it's just something a bit kind of moving and kind of thought provoking. Because I've just found the portrayal of a kind of a working class neighborhood as well to be really genuine, and the kind of situation they're in, and just kind of the constant sort of irony of the whole thing, where they keep calling it a palace, and one of them really buys into it, and then one of them doesn't, and everything. I just thought was really nice. We should probably wrap up because we're at about the hour mark.
With the full hour.
The full hour, yeah. So, is there anything? I sound like a judge. Do you have any closing remarks?
I suppose. I mean, I would just say, you're saying about the neighborhood. I mean, that's an aspect to it, because like you write the screenplay, and then you hand it over, and the director turns it into a film. And also, and Remy had brought his own ideas to it, and they're like the characters, the story, the situations, and the shape of the thing, and the basic idea. That was all like in that first screenplay that we wrote. But then there are other things that he brings to it, which until we actually saw the film, we didn't know quite what. So it's got surprises in it for us, which is quite nice. But also, like, some of them are sort of opportunistic things in a way that you go to a place and it's not until you're there that you discover that, hey, there's this possibility. Like, I think they picked this place in Tilbury to shoot, and there's a sequence in the film which is, and people have picked up on this, reviewers have picked up on this, it's kind of like the maze in The Shining, where she's walking around and she walks lost. And I'm sure there was always that aspect. There was always that in the script where she goes and she doesn't know the way.
Yeah.
But to actually have a place where you can do it, where you're turning corners and everything's sort of blank and featureless, and it can evoke that same sort of feeling of a maze. In a way, that was just in the location. And until that happens, you kind of don't know that
work. They covered that really well.
Yeah. I really like that whole bit.
Yeah, well, look, thanks so much for coming on, Toby. I hope we'll have you back again soon. Felicity, thanks for coming on for the first time. We'd love to have you back anytime if you want to come and talk. I'm sure Toby's told you all about the crap we talk about all the time. And you're very welcome to join in on that whenever you like. Sadly, all through, everything has to be done by this now because it's just not safe to meet up in person anymore, which is a real shame. But, that is what that is. So thanks so much. Congratulations, obviously, on this. It's going down really well all over, and we hope you enjoyed it at home. If you have any questions, I know Toby at the very least likes to lurk in the comments sometimes. So if you've got any questions, I guess you can chuck them below. You guys are both on Twitter as well, and can be tweeted at. May I put your Twitter handles on screen? Is that okay?
Yeah.
For people to tweet at you. Grand, cool. So there you go. You can ask these guys about his house. If you haven't watched it, go watch it now because it is good. It is great, in fact. And we will see you next time with whatever else we decide to release on this channel. Bye bye.
Partia,